Hey guys, tonight let's do the very sensible thing and gently park our brains somewhere soft and dimly lit. Maybe lower the lights. Maybe pretend tomorrow doesn't exist for a while. You don't have to learn anything important. You can simply float along while a long-dead Roman emperor makes quietly questionable life choices in the background. Because tonight we begin with Tiberius. Yes, that Tiberius. The brooding, awkward second emperor of Rome. The man who somehow managed to inherit the most powerful position on earth and still behaved like someone who would rather be left alone with his books, his grudges, and a nice isolated island, which, spoiler alert, is exactly what he eventually did. So settle in, get comfortable, let your thoughts wander lazily. We're going to stroll slowly through ancient Rome, not run. No shouting, no dramatic trumpet music, just quiet imperial dysfunction, delivered at bedtime speed. Now, Tiberius was born in 42 BCE, which already tells you life was going to be complicated. Rome was in its everyone is stabbing everyone but calling it politics era. Julius Caesar had just been assassinated. The Republic was wobbling like a poorly assembled table from a discount furniture store. Tiberius himself was born into the Claudian family. Old money, serious faces, lots of sharp noses on statues. His mother was Livia Drusilla, one of the most powerful women in Roman history. Calm on the outside, steel on the inside, the kind of woman who could smile politely while rearranging the entire empire behind the scenes. Livia divorced Tiberius's father and married Octavian, who later became Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, which meant young Tiberius suddenly found himself adopted into the imperial household. Surprise! You're royalty now. Please enjoy the pressure. And honestly, Tiberius never seemed to enjoy any of it. He grew up well-educated, trained in rhetoric, military command, and all the noble Roman skills like standing very stiffly and pretending you enjoy long speeches. He was intelligent, capable, calm, also emotionally about as expressive as a marble column, which, in Rome, was considered a positive personality trait. As a young man, Tiberius became an excellent general. He led campaigns in Germania and Pannonia. He won battles. He stabilized borders. Soldiers respected him. He followed rules. He planned carefully. He didn't rush into chaos like some overly dramatic hero from a bad epic poem. Of course, he was good at the one job that kept him far away from Roman social life, because socially, Tiberius was not thriving. He was serious, quiet, uncomfortable with public attention. He didn't enjoy flattery. He didn't enjoy parties. He didn't enjoy small talk. He didn't enjoy most humans in general, which is awkward when your entire career depends on crowds applauding you. He married a woman named Vipsania Agrippina, and this, oddly enough, seems to have been the one genuinely happy relationship of his life. They loved each other. They had a son. They lived fairly peacefully. Tiberius looked almost relaxed for a moment, which for him was basically a miracle. Naturally, Rome could not allow that to continue. Augustus decided that political alliances mattered more than Tiberius's feelings. So he ordered Tiberius to divorce Vipsania and marry his own daughter, Julia, because dynasties love rearranging people like furniture. Tiberius obeyed, because Roman duty, because pressure, because saying no to the emperor usually ends badly. He divorced the woman he loved. Reportedly, he later saw her in public and nearly broke down in tears, which tells you how emotionally bottled up this man already was. His new wife, Julia, was lively, very social, very fond of parties, attention, and scandal. She had affairs, lots of them. Rome whispered constantly. Tiberius did not enjoy this arrangement. He found her embarrassing, exhausting, probably deeply irritating in every possible way. Eventually, Augustus had Julia exiled for her behavior, which was awkward for everyone involved. Tiberius was left with a political marriage that had never worked, and a general sense that life was mildly disappointing. So what did Tiberius do when overwhelmed? He left. He withdrew to the island of Rhodes for several years, semi-retirement, studying philosophy, avoiding politics, basically ghosting the Roman Empire before ghosting was trendy. Augustus was not thrilled. Rome needed heirs. Rome needed visible leadership. Tiberius was off quietly vibing with Greek thinkers instead. Eventually, political necessity dragged him back. Augustus had lost other heirs, people kept dying, family trees kept collapsing, and suddenly Tiberius was once again the default option. Not because anyone was excited, more like, well, you're still alive, so congratulations. Augustus adopted Tiberius formally, lined him up as successor, gave him authority gradually, trained him in governance. Tiberius complied dutifully, though you can practically feel the internal sigh echoing through history. When Augustus finally died in 14 CE, Tiberius became emperor at age 55, which is not exactly the age where you wake up eager for a brand new stressful career move. His early reign was surprisingly decent. He governed carefully. He respected the Senate more than expected. He avoided reckless spending. He stabilized finances. He kept the borders secure. He didn't chase glory. He didn't build giant vanity monuments everywhere. He tried to keep things boring. And honestly, boring leadership is sometimes excellent leadership. Rome enjoyed relative stability. The treasury stayed healthy. Taxes weren't insane. Corruption was limited. For a while, everything hummed along quietly. But Tiberius still hated public life. He disliked ceremonies. He disliked speeches. He disliked being watched. He disliked the constant political flattery and subtle manipulation that came with power. He distrusted people deeply, probably for good reason. Over time, his personality began to harden. He became more withdrawn, more suspicious, more emotionally distant. Not cruel necessarily, just colder, like a man slowly pulling his emotional blankets tighter and tighter around himself. And then there was Sejanus. Sejanus was the commander of the Praetorian Guard, the elite soldiers who protected the emperor. He was ambitious, charming, politically clever. He slowly gained Tiberius's trust, which was rare and therefore dangerous. Sejanus began influencing appointments, controlling access to the emperor, quietly building power. Meanwhile, tragedy kept visiting Tiberius. His son Drusus died unexpectedly. Many suspected poisoning, possibly orchestrated by Sejanus and Drusus' own wife. Family drama, Roman edition. Tiberius became increasingly isolated and paranoid, because when everyone around you might be poisoning each other, trust becomes more of a decorative concept. Rome itself also became more politically tense. Accusations of treason increased, trials multiplied, informers thrived. Tiberius allowed the system to run harshly, even if he didn't actively enjoy it. He preferred distance rather than micromanagement, which brings us gently, calmly, sleepily toward Capri. Around 26 CE, Tiberius made a decision that confused, annoyed, and mildly terrified the Roman elite. He left Rome completely. He moved permanently to the island of Capri, off the coast of southern Italy. Rocky cliffs, sea air, quiet isolation. Excellent place to avoid people you don't like, which, for Tiberius, was basically everyone. He built several villas there, the most famous being Villa Jovis, perched high on a cliff. Dramatic views, ocean breezes, lots of stairs, plenty of privacy. A perfect introvert fortress. From Capri, Tiberius continued ruling the empire by letter. Messengers carried orders back and forth. Senators traveled nervously to visit him. Most governance was delegated to Sejanus in Rome, which, in hindsight, was not the best management strategy. But from Tiberius's perspective, Capri was peace. No crowds, no endless ceremonies, no forced smiles. Just sea air, books, quiet walks, and the occasional mildly suspicious thought drifting through his mind like a lazy cloud. Of course, this is where the rumors begin. Ancient historians loved gossip, especially about emperors they disliked, especially when those emperors lived far away behind locked gates and sent letters instead of charming speeches. Writers like Suetonius and Tacitus painted Capri as a den of secret decadence, bizarre habits, and morally questionable hobbies. Some of these stories were probably exaggerated, some were likely invented, some might have been partially true. It's hard to separate fact from dramatic ancient clickbait. But the reputation stuck. Capri became whispered about as a strange, shadowy retreat where the emperor slowly withdrew from humanity. Not violently, not dramatically, just quietly weird. Tiberius himself, meanwhile, grew older, more cautious, more distant. He trusted fewer people, He preferred solitude. His health declined slowly. His moods fluctuated. He spent long hours reading, thinking, and possibly brooding gently into the Mediterranean horizon like a Roman version of a moody cat on a windowsill. And all the while, Sejanus was expanding his power back in Rome, eliminating rivals, controlling access, positioning himself dangerously close to the center of authority. Tiberius eventually realized this, because even sleepy emperors eventually notice when someone else starts rearranging the furniture of power. In 31 CE, Tiberius orchestrated Sejanus's sudden downfall. Arrest, execution, political purge, swift and efficient. The empire exhaled awkwardly. Trust levels dropped even further. Paranoia crept higher. After this, Tiberius withdrew even more deeply into isolation. He ruled from Capri until his death in 37 CE. Letters, orders, minimal appearances, minimal warmth, minimal enthusiasm for basically everything except staying away from Rome. He died at around 77 years old, which was impressively old for the ancient world. His legacy remained complicated. Some remembered him as a capable administrator who kept Rome stable. Others remembered him as a dark, reclusive tyrant who abandoned the capital and ruled from a lonely island. Reality, as usual, was probably somewhere in the middle. A capable man who never wanted the job. A serious personality trapped inside an extroverted political system. A ruler who slowly retreated emotionally as life kept removing everything he cared about. And Capri became the symbol of that retreat. Not just a place, but a mood. A quiet withdrawal from noise, expectation, and people who never quite felt safe to trust. Let's gently float there next, because Capri itself deserves its own slow wander. The cliffs, the villas, the silence, the rumors. The strange calm of a man who simply wanted to be left alone with the sea and his thoughts. So breathe slowly. Let the waves roll quietly in your imagination. All right, let's ease back in. Maybe stretch a little. Maybe mentally adjust your imaginary pillow. The Roman Empire is still running in the background, mostly on paperwork and polite anxiety, and Tiberius is still up on his cliff, enjoying the ancient version of Do Not Disturb mode. So now we're really arriving on Capri. Capri is a small island in the Bay of Naples. Blue water, sharp limestone cliffs, sea breezes that smell like salt and sunshine. In modern times, it's glamorous and full of tourists taking photos of salads. In Tiberius's time, it was quieter, rugged, a little remote, perfect for someone who had spent decades surrounded by crowds, politics, and aggressively enthusiastic senators. When Tiberius moved there permanently, he didn't just rent a nice seaside bungalow and call it a day. Of course not. He built multiple villas across the island, because why live in one building when you can have options? Ancient Roman version of real estate flexing, but with more marble and fewer mortgages. The most famous was Villa Jovis. It sat high on a cliff, almost floating above the sea. From up there, you could see the horizon stretch endlessly. Ships looked like tiny moving dots. The mainland felt very far away, emotionally and geographically, which was exactly the point. Villa Jovis had terraces, gardens, private chambers, baths, and plenty of space for wandering slowly while thinking mildly dramatic thoughts about destiny and betrayal. It was also strategically positioned. You could see anyone approaching by sea long before they arrived. Privacy plus security. Introvert heaven. Tiberius arranged his daily life around quiet routines. He read a lot. Greek philosophy, history, poetry. He wrote letters. He met with a small circle of trusted attendants. He took walks. He observed the sea. He avoided large gatherings. He avoided Rome entirely. And honestly, it sounds kind of peaceful. If you ignore the whole absolute ruler of the Mediterranean world responsibility humming quietly in the background, from Capri, governance happened through correspondence. Messengers sailed constantly between the island and the capital. Orders went out. Reports came in. Tiberius approved or rejected decisions. He issued legal rulings. He maintained imperial authority without ever physically appearing in the Senate chamber, which for the senators was deeply unsettling. They preferred emperors they could see, flatter, read facial expressions from, and gently manipulate if necessary. An emperor sending letters from a distant island felt unpredictable, cold, slightly spooky, like receiving instructions from a mountain oracle that had developed trust issues. Some senators traveled to Capri for audiences. These trips were stressful. Imagine climbing up a steep island cliff to politely greet a man who might decide your political fate based on his mood that morning. Small talk must have been tense. Tiberius himself became increasingly private. He trusted very few people. He limited access carefully. He disliked surprises. He preferred structure, predictability, control over his environment, all understandable traits for someone who had lived through decades of political chaos and family tragedy. Of course, this extreme privacy created a vacuum. And into that vacuum poured rumors. Roman historians were not gentle. They loved scandal, especially when an emperor was not around to defend himself. Stories began circulating about strange behavior on Capri, secret indulgences, bizarre habits, moral decay. Some accounts describe elaborate parties, others suggest disturbing personal practices. The details get increasingly theatrical the further you go. Modern historians generally agree that many of these stories were exaggerated or outright invented. Political smear campaigns existed long before social media. Discrediting a withdrawn ruler was convenient, especially for writers who wanted dramatic material. But even if we filter out the wildest claims, it's clear that Tiberius's isolation made people uncomfortable. Humans tend to fill silence with imagination, and imagination rarely chooses the most boring explanation. In reality, much of his daily life was probably dull. Long, quiet mornings, light meals, slow conversations, reading, occasional administrative meetings, afternoon walks, sunset views over the water, repeated day after day, the rhythm of someone intentionally shrinking his world. He was aging. His body was slower, his energy lower, his patience thinner. He had outlived most of his close family. He had buried a son. He had watched friends turn into political threats. He had learned that power attracts both devotion and betrayal in equal measure. So he retreated emotionally as well as physically. Capri became not just a residence, but a boundary between him and disappointment. Meanwhile, Rome continued spinning its political machinery. After Sejanus's execution, the atmosphere grew tense. Informers multiplied. Trials continued. The Senate became more cautious. Everyone feared accidentally saying something that might be interpreted badly in a letter read on a distant island. Tiberius did not personally orchestrate every harsh action, but he allowed the system to function without much mercy. Distance made it easier to approve punishments abstractly. Names on scrolls, not faces in a room. Bureaucracy tends to dull empathy, even in sandals and togas. His correspondence became more blunt over time, less patient, more suspicious. He demanded precision. He disliked ambiguity. He corrected senators sharply when they phrased things too vaguely. He expected loyalty without emotional warmth. Very Roman, very tired. At Capri, his inner circle grew smaller. Trusted freedmen, a few advisors, household staff, guards, not a bustling court. More like a quiet administrative bubble perched over the sea. There's something oddly modern about it. A powerful executive withdrawing to a remote location, running everything through messages, avoiding public appearances, preferring solitude. If Tiberius had email and noise-canceling headphones, he probably would have been thrilled. He also spent time reflecting on philosophy. Stoic ideas appealed to him. Self-control, endurance, emotional restraint, accepting what cannot be changed, which matched his personality perfectly. If anything, he might have leaned into stoicism a bit too hard, emotionally freezing himself into permanent reserve mode. Visitors to Capri often described him as polite but distant. He spoke calmly. He listened carefully. He did not overshare. He did not laugh much. He did not offer warmth easily. Conversation stayed formal, controlled, predictable, and yet, beneath that controlled surface, there were hints of lingering sadness. Regret over lost relationships, disappointment with political life, the sense that he had never truly chosen his own path, that his entire existence had been shaped by duty rather than desire. Sometimes, late in life, he reportedly reflected on his mistakes openly, admitting that absolute power brought more anxiety than satisfaction, that ruling humans was harder than commanding armies. That trust was fragile. That loneliness followed leadership like a shadow that never quite left. Not exactly cheerful bedtime thoughts. but oddly calming in their quiet honesty. As the years passed, his health declined gradually. He suffered from various ailments typical of old age: fatigue, weakness, occasional illness. Nothing dramatic, just the slow, gentle wearing down of a long-lived body. He continued issuing orders almost until the end. Still attentive, still mentally sharp, still cautious, still distant, Capri remained his world. When he finally died in 37 CE, news traveled slowly back to Rome. Some celebrated quietly. Some felt anxious about succession. Some simply felt relieved that the long, strange chapter of island rule had closed. He was succeeded by Caligula, which, in hindsight, made people nostalgic for Tiberius's boring seriousness very quickly. But that's a different sleepy disaster for another night. Tiberius left behind a legacy that refused to settle neatly into one box. He was not purely evil. He was not purely kind. He was competent, cautious, emotionally reserved, deeply shaped by loss and pressure. A man who never quite fit the role fate handed him. And Capri remains tied to his name forever. A place of retreat, of rumor, of quiet withdrawal, of human complexity slowly aging in sea air. Let's drift a little deeper now, not into scandal, not into shock, just into the small, strange personal habits and quiet eccentricities that made Tiberius feel very human beneath the marble statues. Nothing dramatic, nothing loud, just gentle oddities. Take a slow breath,